Welcome to another episode of Random but Relevant, presented by My Block TV. I am your host, Oswald Williams. She is the co-author of a really, really good book. One of my mentors is a co-authors too. 4 Colored Girls Who Have Considered Politics. Brooklyn's own Miss Leah Daughtry. It's a pleasure to have you, Miss Daughtry.
Hello. How you doing, my brother?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great, thanks.
That's good. I was just doing my research over the last couple of days, and I saw the presentations you guys did as a group on C-SPAN.
Oh, okay.
I was so inspired. I got a lot of information.
Great. I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So do we. And I also wanted to commend you on the Breakfast Club interview. I got so much knowledge and so much information.
Oh, great. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was. It was really good to see y'all on that show.
Thank you.
Yeah. I just want to, before I get into it, I just wanted to just give you a little background. Robbie wanted to touch on this subject. Personally, I have a lot of nephews that are in the age range from anywhere between 20 and 25, and they're really molding their perception of politics now. So with all this stuff going on, I think their perception now is like it's just no work going on in Washington. It's just a bunch of commentary, no real work being done. So today, we want to this is really for the young kids and try to help them get a better understanding, credible understanding of what's really going on in politics, regardless of what you see on the media.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yes. So the first question I want to get into was actually something you had said on the Breakfast Club, and I just wanted to elaborate. You said the Reverend Jackson campaign taught you guys that winning comes in different definitions. Could you just talk on that, just speak on that just a little bit?
Sure. I think we are acculturated to have one definition of what it means to win, and particularly when it comes to electoral politics, we think of winning as winning the election and being sworn into office. And, what we learned during the Jackson campaign, both 84 and 88, is that, and I personally had to come to a different understanding of what it means to win, because I was working on the 84 campaign, and I thought was winning means that we win the presidency, he gets sworn into office, and he takes his seat in the White House. Well, what we learned was that we had to expand the definition of what it meant to win. And that's what I meant by what I said, Reverend Jackson taught us to expand the definition. So what we learned from that campaign is that winning came in the form not simply winning the White House, but what we won in the Jackson campaign is that we registered hundreds of thousands of people to vote. And as a result of the people that we registered to vote, we were able to change City Hall in every major city across America, so that at the end of the Jackson campaign, as a result of the Jackson campaign, there were black mayors in every major city across the nation, including in New York. We got David Dinkins.
Yes.
But they also trained thousands of political operatives, including people like me who'd never worked on presidential political campaigns before, and who then were able to bring those values of community first values to the process. And so now Reverend Jackson's campaigns were my first campaigns. Now I'm about to go into my 8th presidential cycle. But it was that foundation that then created all of these operatives who are now policy directors, campaign managers, political strategists all across the country, and who have a long-term, deep impact in terms of what's happening with our elected officials across the country. And that never would have happened with the Jackson campaign. And I don't know that it would have happened had he won the way that we went into it, thinking that winning was defined. If he had become the president, I don't know if we would have won all those mayor's offices. I don't know if the party rules of how presidents are elected would have changed as in the degree and had the effect that they had. I don't know if all of us would have gone into retail politics the way that we did because of his campaign. So I think he just changed for us what winning is. And I took that lesson into the rest of my life, and I think it's something that is transportable. Sometimes winning isn't always what you think it is. Sometimes the longer term impact comes from winning in a different way.
Oh, absolutely. And what are some things, like if more people like myself wanted to help? You spoke on demystifying the process. What are some things we can do to demystify the process for some young kids that really are getting discouraged by the last maybe 3 years, 2 years?
Yeah, listen, first of all, let's start with all politics is local, right? So everything begins at home, in your home, on your block, in your neighborhood. So I want us to, when I say demystify it, let's take it out of this politics is all about the presidency. Politics is what happens on your block in your life. I like to say that the definition of politics for me is the decision-making process through which we determine who gets what, where, when, why, and how. It's about the distribution of the resources, whether those resources are material, whether those resources are emotional, whether those resources are physical. So we have, and if you understand it that way, then you understand the politics on your job, the politics in your church, the politics in your fraternity or your sorority, the politics in your school board. Every place has politics. So it's not this big, mysterious thing that you don't know how it works. If you can navigate the politics on your job, you can navigate electoral politics.
That's right.
So it's the same principles. It's about the relationships. It's about it's about the information. It's about how you use the information that you have. It's about how you leverage the information, the relationships that you have, whether that's in your house, and you try to determine whose day it is to take out the trash and whose day it is to pick up the baby, or whether it's on your block, when is the trash getting picked up? When is the street sweeper coming in Brooklyn? We got the street sweeper that comes down my block once or twice a week. So all of those things are political, and once you understand that, then it's a little bit easier to try to navigate your way through. So if you want to get involved and you're a young person, listen, go to the school board meeting, go to the community board meeting. In New York, we have community boards.
Yeah.
So you go to the community board meetings, just sit and listen. That's where they're making decisions about what kind of businesses are going to be on the block. That's where they're making the decisions about how often the trash is getting picked up. And then think about what is important to you. What is important to you in your neighborhood? What is the issue that is of concern to you? Whether it's there's too many rats in the park, whether it's the trash man doesn't come often enough, whether it's the businesses are too loud, or there's neighbors with the music too loud, or whatever your issue is, and then get you and your friends and say, we're going to do something about this.
Exactly.
We want to do something about this. And all it takes is 2 or 3 of you, 4 or 5 of you, to go down to the meeting and raise your hand and say, hey, man, we need something done about, the folks that's having parties in the park on weeknights at midnight when we got to go to work in the morning. We need a noise ordinance because that's not cool.
Yes.
It doesn't take a lot of folks. It takes 2 or 3 folks with a voice.
Absolutely. Growing up as a kid in Brooklyn, I remember as a kid always wondering, I used to see A&P commercials and Pathmark commercials, and I used to always want to know, why do we have Key Food and Fishers? So when I read portions of the book, and on the Breakfast Club, you spoke on Operation Breadbasket and what it was a continuation of. Could you just talk to the audience a little bit about that?
Sure. Operation Breadbasket was the economic arm of Dr. King's Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And while SCLC, its nickname, was focused on civil rights issues we're talking about back in the 60s, civil rights issues like, not sitting on the back of the bus and having the right to and desegregation in terms of water fountains in schools and transportation. The economic arm, Operation Breadbasket, was about how we move the needle for African Americans so that we have the same kind of opportunity for us as other people had. So in New York, what that took, it's New York, so it wasn't the same as the South. In New York, we didn't have to ride the back of the bus, and we didn't have the colored water fountains, but we did have definite disadvantage when it came to economic opportunity. So when I was a little girl, one of my earliest memories was going with my father, the Reverend Herbert Daughtry, down to the A&P, and we ran and he was running a boycott. He was the chair of Operation Breadbasket in Brooklyn, and Reverend Jackson came to town, and they were running this boycott outside the A&P, and some of us are old enough to remember A&P supermarkets, because A&P had discriminatory hiring practices, and they weren't hiring black people. And so we embarked on this boycott of A&P until they relented and began to hire African American people. And it's hard for us to understand that these days because we have grocery stores that hire our own people. But back then, you go into or downtown on Fulton Street and at Woolworth or some of the other stores, and you wouldn't see black people until we were able to change those rules. And so that's what Operation Breadbasket was about. There's still a lot more work to be done in our communities around economic opportunity and leveling the playing field so that we all have the tools that we need to fully engage in the American economy. But in those days, it was just as simple as getting corporate companies that operate in our community to hire people from our community.
Understood. Thank you. Also, this has shifted over a little bit to just kind of like terminologies in politics. Like I said, a lot of my nephews, this past election was their first time voting. And what I've noticed is like a lot of them got kind of, I won't say turned off, but kind of discouraged by just not understanding terminology a lot. And I think that's what made a lot of people, a lot of them kind of want to shift to Bernie, not because of the actual experience. It was more or less because I think it was kind of made simple. So I'm just going to ask, throw a couple terminologies out to you. If you could just explain to the audience briefly what it means. Proportional representation and plurality voting. I'm sorry, excuse me.
Plurality voting.
Plurality.
Okay. So proportional representation, let's take that on a presidential level because that's probably easiest to understand. In the old days, pre-Reverend Jackson, candidates could run for president, and whatever candidate got the most vote in a state, let's say in Michigan, a candidate got 50.1% of the vote, and the other candidate got 49.9% of the vote. In the old days, it was a winner-take-all system. So that candidate with 50.1% would get all the delegates. And the candidate with 49.9% would get 0 delegates. Under the rules that Reverend Jackson forced the party to change these rules, we now have proportional representation, which means if you win 50.1% of the vote, you get 50.1% of the delegates. It's not winners. We no longer do, on the Democratic Party side, we no longer do winner take all. You are awarded the number of delegates that is commensurate with the percentage of the vote that you won. So that's proportional representation. When you talk about plurality voting is a candidate can win. It's basically she who gets the most votes wins.
Gotcha.
Right, and it may not be a majority. In some states, they have runoffs. You may have seen this in mayor's races or in governor's races, where no one gets the majority. So let's separate that out. So plurality voting in most states means that whoever gets the most votes wins, even if they only got 40% of the votes. You may have multiple candidates, 5 candidates in a race. And one gets 10%, one gets 20%, one gets 5%, one gets 2%, and somebody gets 40%. The person with 40% might win the race, even though 60% of the people voted for other candidates.
Got you, understood.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, there are some states where you have to, it's plurality voting, but you must win a majority in order to win the race. That's called majority plurality voting. So if you don't win 50% plus 1, then they have what they call a runoff.
Gotcha.
We used to have this in New York. In the mayor's race, you had to have a runoff. And we saw it in Georgia with Stacey Abrams. You had to have a runoff because neither candidate got 50% of plus 1 of the candidate, of the primary vote. So then they ran a whole new race of the top 2 vote getters to determine who would actually get a majority of the voters' vote. Now, there are pros and cons to both things. Some people say if you don't have a majority of the votes of all of the voters, then you really aren't representing the electorate if you don't have 50% plus 1. Other people say, you know, if you swing this open and you've got 10 candidates, whoever gets the most votes, they ought to be the one to run and to win. Then let them have the office. So there are pros and cons on both sides.
Got you. Thank you so much. Why is it so important for the U.S. to update their election laws?
Well, you know, our election laws, and particularly on the federal side, which is what I can best speak to, our election laws, particularly the way that we run for president and the way that we select the president, were written back when our country was founded in 1776. Yeah. And updated, of course, after, Reconstruction and slavery and all that. But they were written in a way because if you recall, there was a great divide among the people who were writing the Constitution about whether you should have the popular vote, let the people vote, and let the people decide who the winner, who the president ought to be, or whether the people were, on the other side, whether the people were even equipped to make such a lofty decision. And so they created this electoral college, which advantaged the landowners who were white and who were male, to give them an outsized role in the determination of who the president would be. And so that if the people, quote unquote, voted wrong, then the Electoral College could come in filled with landowners, white men, who would then be able to overturn the will of the people. So if that is the process that has been in place and the background of why that process is put in place back 200 years ago, now in this age of technology, in this age of, we say we are a representative democracy, shouldn't our laws be updated to reflect where we are now in the nation?
Absolutely.
We have seen in recent years 2 elections, the 2000 presidential election and the 2016 presidential election, where the people voted for one candidate. The majority of the people voted for Al Gore, and the majority of the people voted for Hillary Clinton. But because of the Electoral College system, a bunch of people decided, basically, they overturned the will of the voters. So, in my opinion, you can't have a representative democracy or call yourself a representative democracy if the democracy is not representative. Absolutely. So we've got to change our laws, I think, and update them to reflect where we are now in the 21st century, and to ensure we don't have landowners who need to overturn the will of the people. The people ought to be able to elect who they want to elect and have their voices heard. And the system we have now basically allows the will of the people and the voice of the people to be disregarded and dismissed in favor of an elite group who may seek to vote a different way.
Absolutely. Random but relevant, presented by My Block TV. I'm your host, Oswald Williams. We're here with the co-author of 4 Colored Girls Who Considered Politics. I want to go back. You mentioned Miss Abrams, Stacey, out of Georgia. Mm-hmm. Just right, I think the day after the election, Mignon Moore, she had posted some statistics about, you know, who actually voted that day, and I saw it was just like a real, very low statistics amongst men or African American males. I couldn't remember. I don't want to quote it wrong, but why do women get such a why are women being judged so critical when it comes to running for political office as opposed to men?
You know, I think it is a challenge that women have in this country in particular, the legacy of sexism that has been part of this country's founding, regardless of race. You know, I think historically, if I were to do a historical analysis, I think it's because, you know, in other countries in the world, they have had the experience of having women as leaders for centuries. When you look at England, they've had the Queen, who also served as commander-in-chief, certainly in France and also in Spain and Italy. They've had women as queens, as head of government, and we've just never had that in America. We haven't had that experience, and so I think it's much, it was ingrained in our founding. As the Puritans and others left Europe to come to America, they came with a very patriarchal view of society, very patriarchal view of the government, and in fact, we're trying to get away from some of the freedoms that they perceived as oppression in coming to and founding this country. And we've just never been able to get away from that. So I think the patriarchy, the sexism, the misogyny infiltrates all levels of our society, and I think it's getting better, and just the awareness of it on the part of women and men, because, you know, women can be sexist too. I think the awareness of it and that it is in our consciousness is extraordinarily helpful and just helps us to be more mindful of what we're doing. And it certainly plays itself, you know, we see it in the boardroom. There are very few women as heads of corporations. We see it in the classroom. We see it all across this country and obviously in our politics as well. It's unfortunate because I think what we need right now in this country, our people are hurting. Americans, wherever you live, and certainly black people, as Reverend Jackson said, if America catches a cold, black America gets pneumonia. Absolutely. We have many needs, and I don't think that it is relevant what gender someone is. If they've got a solution to the problem, and if they're willing to serve, then let them serve. And so we got to either get over our own selves and allowing the best qualified person to serve, to run, to win, and to lead, regardless of whether they're male or whether they're female. And is something I think is going to take, that is changing rapidly. But there's still a lot of work to be done. We've seen this now. We've got a record number of women serving in the United States Congress, and I think that's a symbol and a sign that people are willing to let the best person lead and not paying attention to gender as much.
Absolutely. In 2021 will be the anniversary of women's rights, right?
2020, yes.
2020.
2019, the first state passed the women's rights. Women's ability to vote, that was Wyoming, and then the last state passed it in 2020 and it became law. How
beautiful would it be to just wrap all of that up with a female president in 2021?
Wouldn't it be great?
Yes, it really would. So besides the obvious people that we see getting all of the media attention, you know, the Kamala Harris's, the young lady out of the Bronx that just won a huge election. Who are some people that, you know, that's really under the radar, that's really just doing some good stuff in the party?
You know, there are lots of women who are up and coming and who, you know, just come through an election cycle. So a lot of them have won office. Johanna Hayes, and listen, they're regular people. Johanna Hayes in Connecticut is a teacher. Wow. And she decided to run for Congress and she won. Lauren Underhood was a nurse. She won in Illinois, and she's also the youngest African-American woman to ever serve in the United States Congress. She's just 29. And so, you know, so we had a lot of successes. There are lots of women who are up and coming on the national scene and who we're looking forward to, so like Tish James in New York.
Absolutely. I worked for Tish James.
Yeah, she's fantastic,
yeah. And
we're so excited that she won and is making her name on the national stage, and we're going to see what she's going to do as the first African-American attorney general in New York. And look, California's first African-American Attorney General, Kamala Harris, is now in the Senate, and sounds like she may run for president.
Yes.
So who knows where Tish may go. So there are any number of women who are making their way, and especially proud of sisters who are on the front lines doing the hard work of grassroots organizing, like Latasha Brown with Black Voters Matter, something she created, and she went all through counties in the South, reaching rural voters who had not previously been touched by any candidates, and with her bus that she wrapped with the logo Black Voters Matter. So sisters like her, sisters like we're going to see them soon. Corinne Jean-Pierre from Move On, she's going to be commentating on MSNBC. People like Stephanie James of Collective PAC and Glenda Carr of Higher Heights, who are two sisters who have really pioneered a way for Black folks to get involved in the political and the fundraising side of politics. We don't often get involved in that side, but they created their own organizations and raised money to help candidates win elections. This is groundbreaking work, and so I think we can expect those sisters to see those sisters on in the forefront in the days to come.
Do you see Florida turning into a red state soon?
Florida is interesting because, you know, the demographics of Florida are always challenging. They have a Latino population that is significant, but that is not monolithic. Mm-hmm. The Cuban population, which often votes Republican. There's a growing now Puerto Rican population, folks who had to leave the island after the hurricane and who are now settled in Florida, who have traditionally voted Democratic. So that calls for a particularly enhanced strategy to reach the Latino community. And of course, in the African-American community, you've got American-born African-Americans, and of course, then you have the Haitian community and other immigrant communities. So Florida is a challenging state. I think what Andrew Gillum's campaign has shown is that if you reach to, if you ignore no voter and reach to every voter, including those who are traditionally and have traditionally been ignored by normal campaign strategies, that you are able to be competitive and to win. I think if Andrew had a couple more weeks, he would have been able.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just agreeing with you. Hello? We are having some technical difficulties. Roundup of Relevant presented by My Block TV. When we come back, we can continue our conversation with Ms. Leah Daughtry, co-author of the book, 4 Colored Girls Who Consider Politics. We'll be right back, guys.
Don't kick the camera anymore. I'm rolling. Stand by, ready to roll. I don't understand Oswald. Oswald is multi-talented, but sometimes it just gets to his head.
Like the idea of me changing up the theme song, okay? Not saying that anything's wrong with it, but I want to change it up a little bit, okay?
All right, man, but we're running out of time.
I got you, I got you. Are you going to score? You know what? Forget it.
Oh, no.
Forget it.
No.
Forget it. Nah, forget it.
I loved it. I loved it.
We are back. Welcome back to Roundup of Relevant, presented by My Block TV. We are here with the co-author of 4 Colored Girls Who Considered Politics, Ms. Leah Daughtry. I wanted to just piggyback, tell you a quick story about Tish James. I worked with her when she was running for public advocate. Mm-hmm. And one thing I noticed about her, like we did Jamaica Avenue, we did 40 projects, we did Far Rockaway, we did Queensbridge. And one thing I noticed, it was an 8-hour shift, and she was there with us for about 6.5 of the 8 hours.
Wow.
And that just kind of stood out for me. She was on Jamaica Avenue talking to every social class. And I just remember thinking like, yo, that's what's going to make her go far. So my question is how important it is for politicians now to become closer to the constituents that they have, even if they don't have that much access to them. How important it is for them to have to give their constituents access to them.
You know, I think as great and as wonderful as social media is, I think the days of a candidate sitting in their office, taping a television commercial, doing a tweet and an Instagram feed are over. People are looking for connections. Voters want to understand who candidates are. So candidates have to get out there. They got to knock on the doors. They got to meet people. They got to talk with people, not just to ask for their vote, but to understand the needs of the voters, the concerns of the people who they're asking for their vote. And I always, you know, what I want a politician. If you want me to, you got to ask me for my vote.
Yeah.
You have to, and if you don't ask me, then I'm not considering you. Because this is my franchise, and I get to decide what I want to do for it. And if you're not bold enough to ask me to support you, then I'm going to be bold enough to choose another candidate.
Absolutely, absolutely. What you spoke on? You used a term that I really want to speak on. You said we tend to get caught up in a cult of personality. Could you just speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, you know, we these days of Instagram and so forth, you know, we get caught up in you know, who's popular, who, you know, wore the right thing, and this goes for political candidates too. Who's and particularly with women, what the hairstyle is. We want a candidate that's got a wife and 2.5 children, or a husband with the minivan. You know, we get caught up in this who's the nice guy. We saw it during the Bush campaign. Bush was the guy we wanted to have a beer with. We would invite over to the bar. This is what voters said after the election. We would invite Bush over to the barbecue. We would have a beer with Bush. We weren't feeling warm and fuzzy about John Kerry. People didn't feel warm and fuzzy about Hillary Clinton. So when I say a cult of personality, I don't care if they're warm and fuzzy. I want to know, are you going to deliver?
Yes.
For the issues that I care about in my community? Are you going to help me get better schools for my nephews? Are you going to help me deal with this regentrification issue? Are you going to help me buy my first home? Are you going to help me get clean air and clean water? I don't care if you're not warm and fuzzy. You're not coming over to my house. I'm not having you over for the barbecue. You ain't babysitting my kids. I don't have to, it's like I used to tell people, Hillary, she ain't coming to your house. But I know what? I know she's going to take on these people who are trying to keep me paying high bank fees. I know she's going to take on these people who want to continue to have discrimination in our school system. That's what I care about. And so I think for a lot of Americans, a lot of voters, and, you know, we all know folk in our community who care about and who are focused on, although I think it's less true with black people, but folks who are focused on whether they like the candidate's personality. Who cares? I want to know, are they going to deliver?
Absolutely.
I don't have to like them. I don't have to want them to come over for a beer, because the likelihood that they come into my house for a beer is 0 to none. but the likelihood they're going to impact some policy that's going to affect my neighborhood, and whether I can afford the rent, and whether there's going to be a bank, and whether I can get fresh vegetables, that is more likely than them coming to my house to have a beer. So I want us to get away from this cult of personality, this cult of do I like them, and let's focus on, let's make the main thing the main thing. And I think, for my part, black people, in my experience, are much better at getting to the issues and sizing up a candidate and determining what's important in our communities. And we, you know, we get it that, you know, we don't have to like them, but are they going to do the job?
Yeah.
That's what we care about. And that's what I would like to see the rest of the nation move that way.
Absolutely. This is Random but Relevant, presented by My Block TV. I'm your host, Oswald Williams. We're here with the co-host. We're here with the co-author of the book, for colored girls who consider politics, Miss Leah Daughtry. What a person that dedicated their whole life to, you know, servicing people in politics. What are some of your hobbies? Like, what does Ms. Daughtry do, like, just to, like, when she's not working?
So I like to read. The last for fun book I read was Praise Song for the Butterfly by Bernice McFadden, who is one of my favorites. I love her. I like to knit. I knit a lot. It's a great way to reset my mind. I like to walk. I love to travel. I just came back from a cruise with my family for Christmas, which was a lot of fun. And I like a good spa. I love a spa day.
Nice. Brooklyn people walk, don't they?
Oh yeah, we walk everywhere.
Yeah. What are some of your give me a fun memory of, like, in you know, your early days in politics. Just give us a fun memory.
A fun memory.
Or funny.
You know, I think the fun things for me, especially when I was working on my first job in politics, job was working on Capitol Hill for Congressman Ed Towns, who represented my part of Brooklyn. And so I was members of Congress vote. In those days, they voted Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And then Thursday evening, the New York delegation of Congress people would go home, and they all would take the same flight. It was called Eastern Airlines back then, and then it became Continental. And so they would, last votes, you jump in the car, you go to the airport, which is about 10, 15 minutes from Capitol Hill. You get on the shuttle. This was before 9/11, so there was you could literally step out of your car and in 5 minutes be on the airplane because there was no security. You just walk right to the gate. So my first trip, there have been some late votes, and there was like one flight left to get back to New York. So all the New York congressmen, Congressman Rangel, Congressman Flake, Congressman Towns, Congressman Owens, Congressman Ackerman, they were all racing to get to this flight. And so Towns his parking spot was closer, so he put me in the car, and we rode to the airport, racing. I'm sure we broke all kind of speeding laws. And when we got to the curb, he got out of the car, and he said, "Leah, go and tell them to hold the plane." I was like, "Hold the plane? What you mean hold the plane?"
So you had to go through customers?
Go and tell them that we are coming and to hold the plane. And I looked at him like he had 4 heads. And I got out of the car, and I said, "I can't believe this. I'm 23 years old. I'm going, how am I going to hold the whole plane?" And I went down to the Eastern Airlines counter. I said, "The New York delegation is coming. We need you to hold the plane. They're parking their cars." And they said, "Oh, okay." And they held the plane.
Wow.
They held the plane for like 10 minutes, and then they all came streaming in. Rangel, Owens, Towns, Flake, Ackerman, all of them came.
Thank God. Could you imagine that in 2008? 18? 19? Excuse me.
It would never happen. I was like, "What do you mean hold the plane? Hold the plane?" I didn't think things like that happened. And they all came one right after the other. And here was the funniest thing. Each one had a bag of laundry. Because when they went home, they would take their laundry to do at home in the district, at their houses in the district on the weekends.
Wow.
So all these members of Congress with these big laundry bags running for the plane that I had told the airline, "Hold the plane."
Hey, you know another interesting thing when you spoke on Rangel, I realized when I heard you speaking on him and what made you take on the Breadbasket that you were talking about. I realized I only know him from an image on TV and just him speaking up for issues that I could relate to. But I never really realized how deep his history is and how much he dedicated his life to service until I heard you say, like, Rangel gave me a call and said, so I thought that was kind of interesting. That's another reason why we wanted to do this interview so bad, because a lot of times you see these faces and you just see them on TV and you just see them fighting for certain issues, but you don't never really see, you don't never get to see how deep their history is in the service.
Yeah, we're very fortunate, particularly in New York. We have had a lot of lions. Mr. Rangel, Mrs. Chisholm, Adam Clayton Powell, Mr. Flake. Congressman Flake, people don't remember that Reverend Flake of Allen AME Temple was a member of Congress for a time.
Nah, see, and that's not to cut you, but that's another thing. Like, I live in St. Albans, so I just know Mr. Flake from the big churches and what he does for the elderly community. So to hear that, it's like, okay, I'm connecting the dots, if you will.
Yeah, and he was one of the most loved members of Congress because I watched him and I learned from him, because when he would come into the Hill in the morning, he would go into every cafeteria. There's a cafeteria in the bottom of the Longworth, which is where his office was, the Longworth House office building. And he made it a point every morning during the breakfast hour, he'd go in and he'd go behind and say good morning to every one of the people who were working the line. He asked them about their children. Wow. He asked them how they were doing. He wasn't buying anything. He was just checking on them. That's a different spirit right there. That's a different spirit. And then he'd go on up to his office and do his work. And they loved him because of that.
Got you. What would you tell someone that wanted to be a part of a community board? What are some of the steps? And also, where can you go to find credible information on your local politicians' voting record and things like that? What are some sites we can go to?
Yeah, if you want to run for community board, you want to get engaged, listen, go to the community board meetings and see how they function, see how they run. And once you get a sense of how they run, then you can figure out how you get engaged and how you get elected. Now, some of those community board members are appointed by the borough president. At one point it was the borough president, sometimes it's the mayor, but sometimes you run for that. And it doesn't take a lot of votes to win an election. I'll tell you a quick story about my friend. This is in Texas, but you'll get the sense of it. He decided he wanted to be involved in politics one day, so he went to his community board meeting. He lived in Texas, and he went for about 2 or 3 months. And when he went, the only people there were 3 old white men who showed up at every meeting. And he would ask his questions because he had questions, and they ignored him, they dismissed him, and he went long enough and he decided, I'm going to run for community board. So he decided to run for community board, and the day that he went, he took 3 of his friends. So he had himself and 3 friends. He had 4 votes and outvoted the 3 white men who were there, and that's how he got on the community board.
Nice, that's clever.
Very clever. And that's what, if you go to the board meeting, see who's there, see what's going on, understand your issues, and you got to be running for something, not just against someone. What is it that you want to do? What's the issue that you're passionate about in your community? And then go talk to your neighbors and talk to them about what their concerns are. And you'll find some common ground, and you'll build the relationships. Politics is all about relationships, all about relationships. So talk to your neighbors, build a relationship, show up at the meetings, ask your questions, and then when it's time to make your move, find out the rules. What do you need to do to run for community board? Do you need petitions? Do you need signatures? Do you just show up? You got to learn the rules. Reverend Jackson used to tell us, you got to learn the rules. You got to know the rules in order to be able to break the rules.
I know that's right.
Know the rules. If you're interested in knowing what your candidate is doing, go to their websites. They will tell you how they're voting. You can go to the city council website to see how your representatives are voting. What are they voting for? What are they voting against? We have got to learn to make voting a lifestyle and not just an event, which means we got to make it about ensuring that our voices are heard year-round, not just on Election Day. A lot of us, we've now gotten in the habit of voting. We vote, and then we don't go back anymore to the next Election Day. But when we vote, we are hiring people. We are hiring people to do a job for us. There is no job you have ever had or I have ever had where I get hired and the boss don't show up to say what you're doing. How you doing? I'm here to check on you. You ought to be able to go to your elected officials' offices. They work for you. And ask them, what's your position on this issue? How did you vote on this issue? I need you to do this. They ought to know your name. Make yourself a nuisance. You are the boss. And if they are not producing for you, fire them and hire somebody else.
I know that's right. Ms. Daughtry, I want to say thank you again because I have a nephew that's currently a junior in college, and he gets great grades and everything. He DJs is on the side with those parties, and I'm trying to convert that energy from him throwing parties and able to bring people together, transition it into doing the things you're talking about, getting organized and understanding what their power is. So I appreciate you again for.
He can use his parties as organizing tools.
Yes.
He can use his parties to get people information about issues, and it doesn't have to be a big speech. But he's got the power. If he's got the ability to bring people together in a party atmosphere, then he's already an organizer.
Yeah. That's how I try to make.
It's just a matter of dropping a little information at the parties and let people know, hey, it's time to register to vote. Don't forget to register. It's time to vote. He's already got a platform, and he's already proven that he's got the ability to organize people.
That's good. That's right. Random but relevant, presented by My Block TV. I'm your host, Oswald Williams. Ms. Daughtry, we want to thank you again for being on the show. Could you just tell again what this book is available on all platforms, correct?
All platforms, all platforms.
And we're going to put some of the links to the C-SPAN. I was so inspired by the C-SPAN forum. We're going to put the links on the bio and everything.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you, brother.
Thank you. I appreciate you, too, man. I learned a lot. I'm still learning a lot. I've been doing my research. I've been staying up late just learning, connecting dots and learning a lot more than I already know. So I appreciate it.
I'll come back anytime you need, anytime you want.
You hear that? Thank you so much. Random but relevant, presented by My Block TV. Don't forget to join us again. Stay up, good people. Ms. Daughtry.